Balers aren't designed to turn heads, they're made to work. But every major brand has built at least one that goes above and beyond, with more features, more performance, and in some cases, way more value than anyone expected. From vintage classics to unexpected collector favorites, these are the 12 small balers perfect for hobby farms, and some of them are still punching above their weight. Number 12. Chalmer's Roto Baler. You wouldn't have spotted it from across the field. No towering frame, no engine roar. But when you got up close, the Chalmer's Roto Baler made its purpose clear. It didn't try to be everything. It just tried to make hay simpler. In a time when most balers were still oversized and overcomplicated for smaller farms, this little machine showed up with a different idea. Launched in 1947, it rolled out of the factory in Persian orange, low-slung and built for single-pass reliability. Hitch it to a WD, drop it in gear, and it quietly gets to work. The Roto Baler wasn't flashy, and it definitely wasn't made for large outfits. It was made for real farms, modest acreages where timing mattered, and every bale had a place. With a drawbar requirement near 30 horsepower, it matched up well with the tractors farmers already owned. You did not have to upgrade the power to run it, and what it delivered was worth the pull. The bales measured around 36 inches in length and weighed anywhere from 30 to 80 pounds, depending on how wet the hay was and how tight the wrap ended up. The round shape meant water rolled off, giving you more time in the field before spoilage set in. At its core, the machine used a rotating drum that packed hay with consistent pressure. The internal system ran at roughly 60 strokes per minute. Once the bale reached its size, the machine paused to tie it off with sisal twine, and then ejected it cleanly. No exposed platform, no second rider needed, and no wire to deal with. It worked alone and let the operator stay focused. It did have its preferences. Windrow shape mattered. Ragged rows could lead to uneven bales or cause it to clog, but when fed cleanly, it just kept going. The system of belts, chains, and tensioners was serviceable with basic tools. It needed attention, yes, but nothing beyond a careful hand and routine checks. Ever wonder what working at a crawl can actually accomplish? It was never built to race across a field. The speed was slow. Most operators ran just above 2 miles per hour. Early versions also lacked live PTO, so the tractor had to stop during tie-off cycles. It was a stop-start rhythm that took patience, not speed. 4-cylinder gas tractors typically burned around 4 to 5 gallons per hour, depending on load and conditions. By 1964, over 75,000 units had been sold. Production slowed in the early 70s, but their legacy stuck. Many were parked in barns long after their prime, still working when called on. The Roto Baler didn't chase innovation for its own sake. It solved a problem, and for a generation of farmers, that was more than enough. Today, a well-preserved unit typically sells for a few $100s, often between $300 and $750. Not because it is rare, but because it still works. Number 11. New Holland Model 66. Some machines never needed an introduction. They just got pulled into the field and went to work. That's exactly how the New Holland TX66 earned its keep. No chrome, no noise, just a reputation built row by row, season after season. By the time the mid-1990s rolled around, combines were starting to chase complexity. But this one, it kept things honest. Tall, wide, and dust-covered by mid-morning, the TX66 didn't need a showroom to prove anything. It made its case one harvest at a time. Power came from a 6-cylinder diesel engine rated at 267 horsepower. That landed it in the sweet spot for medium-sized farms. Enough output to manage wide headers without pushing the limits of drivetrain or cooling capacity. Grain separation was handled through 6 straw walkers. Simple and effective. When paired with consistent rows, the system didn't need constant adjustment. Straw exited clean. Grain stayed in the tank. But how much could it hold? Around 8,000 quarts in the main grain tank. That was enough to cover ground without constantly braking for unloading. And when it was time to empty out, the auger delivered a steady stream. Full tanks cleared in under 2 minutes under dry conditions. Without headers, the machine weighed close to 24,000 pounds. With the front installed, it held a balanced stance across uneven terrain. On soft ground, it didn't sink or shift. On the roads, it didn't rattle. It simply rolled. Physical dimensions were sizable but still manageable. Height sat just under 13 feet, length crossed 26 feet, and overall width came in near 13 feet, depending on axle configuration. It could still fit through standard gates and clear older shed entries without trouble. Talking about its fuel capacity, it reached 119 gallons. That kept it moving through long shifts, even when working through high moisture crops. You filled it once, then got back to harvesting. The transmission was hydrostatic with 4 forward ranges. It moved smoothly across the cut and held pace between fields. No sudden jolts, no time-wasted shifting. One key feature made a real difference on uneven land: the hillside leveling system. It kept the header and cleaning shoe flat even on a slope, reducing grain loss and maintaining consistent threshing. It didn't matter on flat terrain, but in hilly regions, it turned a good harvest into a great one. Inside the cab, everything had a purpose. Controls were consolidated on the right-hand console. The views out the front and sides were wide and clear. It didn't overwhelm the operator. It simply got out of the way and let the work happen. A well-kept TX66 today can fetch up to $75,000, depending on condition and header setup. Not because it's rare, because it's still reliable. Number 10, John Deere model 14T. It didn't take much to figure out what the John Deere model 14T was made for. One look at the frame, the straight lines, and the pickup reel told you exactly what kind of job it came to do. No frills, no distractions, just a baler built for small farms that needed something they could count on. Released in the mid-1950s, it showed up in classic Deere green and got to work. The profile was all business. No curves, no shine, just a squared-off machine with one purpose: bale the field, stack it up, and be ready to do it again tomorrow. The power came directly from the tractor's PTO, requiring about 25 horsepower at the shaft. That made it ideal for the smaller 2-cylinder or 4-cylinder John Deere tractors, already common on family farms. Each bale measured roughly 14 inches by 18 inches, the right size for hand stacking and easy hauling. Weight depended on density and crop type, but usually fell between 40 and 60 pounds. Consistency was key, which the 14T delivered every time. The pickup used 104 tines to lift hay from the swath. Spread across a wide drum, these tines moved cleanly through windrows and minimized losses. Misses were rare if the rows were even. The plunger stroke measured 12 inches, compressing hay into the bale chamber with each cycle. 5 sets of compression forks ensured tight density. An automatic knotter tied bales using twine, with 4 adjustable tension settings to suit various crops and moisture conditions. Operating speed averaged around 3 miles per hour. It was steady work, not fast, but the timing matched the tractor's low-range torque and kept the knotters from jamming on damp hay. The baler weighed about 3,100 pounds, light enough to trail small tractors, but heavy enough to stay grounded on rough terrain. There were no hydraulic requirements, and the twine mechanism ran mechanically. What was it like to run? Operators say it just worked. You could grease all 34 lube points, 8 on the pickup, 26 on the knotter and plunger, and expect full days in the field with no breakdowns. Fuel use depended on the tractor, typically around 4 gallons per hour for the average 4-cylinder gas engine. From 1954 to 1961, over 35,000 units were sold. It became one of the most widely used square balers in North America. Today, a working model 14T typically sells for between $750 and $1,100. Parts are easy to find, and many are still available. Number 9, Case Model 140. You don't hear running footsteps behind this tractor story. It earned its reputation by simply showing up and doing the job. When introduced in the early 1980s, the Model 140 quietly filled the gap between utility tractors and high-horsepower field workhorses. What did it offer? Steady performance wrapped in no-nonsense four-wheel drive. It arrived with a turbocharged 4-cylinder engine rated at 140 horsepower at the crank. That's enough to pull 4-row planters or heavy implements without overstretching. Peak torque hit 450 pound-feet low in the RPM band, meaning it didn't quit when the going got tough. You'll notice the engine displacement measures 4.5 liters, or 275 cubic inches. Compact, responsive, and well-tuned to the work it had to do. The tractor weighed in at about 12,600 pounds, unballasted. That kind of heft made loader work feel steady and field work stable. Add optional rear ballast for tougher braking tasks. How fast did it go? With the 19-speed power shift transmission, it could cruise at 25 miles per hour on the road. Yet, it still offered steady pass-by-pass control in the field with cruise settings. Fuel was stored in a 66-gallon saddle tank. Many operators report running from dawn to dusk on a single fill, even under steady PTO workload. The rear hitch could lift 15,000 pounds, fitting drills, spreaders, or sprayers with ease. PTO options included both 500 and 1,000 RPM, switched from the cab. No extra parts to chase. Inside, the cab was functional with heating, cooling, and a wide-view windshield. The right-hand console was straightforward. No clutter, no guessing. You climbed in, set it up, and got to work. So, what did it cost? Models from 2011 to 2019 list between $32,000 and $135,000, depending on hours and condition. The case model 140 doesn't demand attention. It quietly shows up, turns wrenches less often, and runs when others stall. In most farms, that's all anyone ever asks. Number 8. Oliver Model 50. Neighbors first noticed the Oliver Model 50 when its meadow green paint caught the sunlight on the field edges. No banners, no sales pitch, just a quiet promise that chores would move a little smoother from that day on. Built in the mid-1960s, the Model 50 entered Oliver's respected 50 series at a moment when farms were growing, but budgets still demanded careful choices. Owners liked that it looked honest: straight fenders, flat hood, cast iron where stress gathered, and nothing added just for show. Power lived in a 6-cylinder engine rated at 92 horsepower at the crank. That rating sat right between small utility units and the big row crop leaders. It could pull 5-bottom plows or turn a heavy grain drill without acting strained, yet it still felt nimble around tight headlands. On the drawbar, the tractor delivered about 75 horsepower. At the PTO, numbers climbed to 81 horsepower. That cushion helped when moving from pulling jobs to PTO tasks, such as forage chopping on rolling hills. The block displaced 310 cubic inches. Farmers chose gasoline for cold starts or diesel for fuel savings. Over time, diesel versions dominated. Low engine speed kept parts stress low and torque steady. Without ballast, the tractor weighed just under 9,000 pounds. That mass planted the rear wheels, yet spared the soil from deep ruts. Operators could bolt on wheel weights when they planned heavy 3-point tillage. Road travel mattered to spread out operations. A top end of 16 miles per hour brought wagons home before dusk. In the field, the usual pace sat between 4 and 6 miles per hour, matching most tillage or planting implements of the era. A 31-gallon tank keeps stopping rare. One fill often carried a farmer from morning chores through evening field work with fuel to spare. Oliver offered a straight gear transmission or an over-under unit that effectively tripled gear choices. Shifting ranges without stopping let operators handle varying soils without losing momentum. The Category 2 hitch lifted close to 5,000 pounds. Mounted plows, planters, and even early air seeders fit within that limit. Visibility was clear from the open operator platform. Levers sat where a hand expected them, and gauges were easy to read at a glance. Later, factory cabs added weather comfort, yet many original platforms stayed open, letting drivers hear the smooth engine note. But why did owners keep these tractors running? Because they asked for little and gave back steady, predictable work each season. Grease it, change fluids, and it answered the starter every spring. Working Model 50 tractors today usually trade between $6,000 and $12,000, depending on hours, tires, and whether a cab is fitted. Not a collector's trophy, but a tool still trusted to finish the job without fuss. Number 7. Massey Ferguson 124. Sometimes the best tools are the ones you hardly notice until you need them. The Massey Ferguson 124 didn't turn heads, but it earned a quiet following on small acreages that needed something simple, steady, and ready when the hay was down. Launched in the late 1970s, it found its place behind low to mid-horsepower tractors. No clutter, no complicated upkeep, just a clean design meant to roll through a few dozen acres every season and not ask for much in return. It produced standard square bales sized at 14 inches by 18 inches, ideal for hand stacking and transport. These dimensions made it practical for small barns, manual labor, and compact storage areas. The pickup measured slightly over 56 inches wide, allowing it to cover well-raked windrows efficiently in a single pass. This reduced the number of field passes and helped maintain uniform bale formation. The plunger operated at approximately 1 stroke per second, compressing hay into tight bales with consistent density. A twine-based knotting system automatically tied each bale without needing wire or manual intervention. The unit weighed around 1,700 pounds, making it light enough for compact tractors while minimizing soil compaction. Its Category 1 PTO hookup operated at 500 revolutions per minute, matching most utility tractors in the 30 to 60 horsepower range. While field operation speed was about 3 miles per hour, balancing effective pickup performance with consistent plunger timing. At this pace, it maintained a reliable output across varying hay conditions. Twine storage was sufficient for about 300 feet of standard Baler twine, which typically allowed a few acres of baling between refills depending on bale length and density. Routine maintenance included greasing 2 knotter points and 4 plunger slide points. Chain tension checks and basic lubrication were typically all that was needed to keep the baler operational for a full season. Bale density could be adjusted manually via tensioning levers located near the chamber. These settings remained stable unless adjusted by the operator, providing predictable results regardless of crop type. The baler included basic safety shielding for the PTO shaft and moving components, with a rear shield over the bale chamber to prevent contact with internal mechanisms during operation. Today, well-maintained Massey Ferguson 124 balers typically sell for between $2,000 and $4,000, depending on condition, twine armware, and PTO compatibility. It wasn't built for high-output operations, but for smaller farms needing reliability, easy servicing, and bale consistency, the 124 remains a strong performer decades after its release. Which of these machines would you want parked in your shed? Tell us below. Tap that like button and hit subscribe for more no-nonsense farm gear breakdowns. Number 6. Ford 542. It showed up at just the right time. The Ford 542 landed in the early 1980s, right when family farms were trying to stretch budgets without falling behind on the work. And this little baler understood the assignment. It was built for tractors in the 40 horsepower range, not the high-dollar machines running custom hay crews. Simple, affordable, and field-ready, it gave smaller operations a fighting chance to keep up without overextending. Bale size stayed true to the small farm standard at 14 inches by 18 inches. That meant easy hand stacking, predictable weight, and tidy loft rows. Each finished bale typically ran between 40 and 60 pounds, depending on crop and density settings. A pickup width of about 55 inches let the 542 clear a well-raked windrow in one pass. The pickup reel used closely spaced steel tines that fed crops smoothly into the auger without bunching. Clean feeding mattered because it set up every bale that followed. Power is transferred through a standard 500 RPM PTO. Ford recommended tractors with at least 35 horsepower at the shaft. Most mid-70s and early 80s utility models handled that easily. Inside, a plunger running roughly 90 strokes per minute compressed hay into a fixed chamber bale case. 5 wedge plates helped maintain density until the twine arm knotter triggered. Twine boxes held around 300 feet of standard baler twine, enough for a full afternoon before refilling. The baler weighed nearly 2,100 pounds empty. That put steady down pressure on the pickup, but didn't overload smaller tractors or create heavy tongue weight. Field speed averaged about 3 miles per hour. Pushing faster risked plugging the feeder or loosening bale density. Operators could fine-tune pressure with a pair of tension crank handles mounted on the bale case. One quick turn raised density for brittle alfalfa stalks, another backed it off for leafy grass. Settings stayed firm until changed. Routine service points were clear and reachable. 2 grease zerks on the knotter's pivot and 6 on the plunger rails took daily grease. Chain drives had slotted shields for fast oil checks, and the flywheel shear bolt sat in plain view for rapid replacement if a slug jammed the chamber. Safety came from full PTO and chain shields, plus a rear bale chamber cover. Those guards kept moving parts out of reach when clearing stray stems or checking knot quality. Why did many owners keep a 542 even after bigger balers hit the market? Because it answered 2 simple questions. Will it start when the hay is right, and will it finish before the rain? For most small operations, that reliability mattered more than capacity numbers. Today, serviceable Ford 542 balers trade between $1,000 and $2,500. Price hinges on knottier condition, pickup tine wear, and whether the original PTO shaft is included. It never tried to outshine competitors in brochures. It simply baled hay, season after season, and that steady record is why many still earn shed space on working farms. Number 5. Heston 530. Need a baler that your 40 horsepower tractor can run without breaking a sweat? The Heston 530 answered that question for thousands of small acre farms when it arrived in the late 1980s. It focused on one job, rolling manageable round bales, and did it with the least possible fuss. The chamber turned out bales 4 feet wide by 4 feet in diameter. Dry grass bundles usually weighed between 500 and 600 pounds, light enough for a 3-point spear on an older utility tractor. Power demand stayed friendly. About 30 horsepower at the PTO spun the belts. So classics like a Ford 3000 or Massey 135 handled it with room to spare. Pickup width measured roughly 38 inches. That meant neat raking mattered. Well-formed windrows fed cleanly. Messy swaths piled up at the throat. When the rows were right, feeding was smooth and steady. Heston used an open throat design. Hay entered directly into the belt chamber. No chopping rotor or pre-compression. Fewer moving parts translated to fewer plugs when the crop turned patchy or light. Twine wrap was standard. Early units used a lever-controlled tie. Later models offered a cab trigger option. Either way, operators kept full control of timing. Net wrap was not on the menu, and many owners liked the simplicity that came with twine only. Empty weight stood near 2,000 pounds. Light on the tongue, gentle on soft ground, and easy to back into a corner of the shed without rearranging everything else. Baling speed lived around 2 to 3.5 miles per hour. Push faster and you risk loose cores. Feed it steadily, and every bale came out consistently. Twine boxes carried enough line for several dozen rolls, and the covers opened wide so you could reload without climbing over belts. Density levers adjusted bale tension, but even at the firmest setting, the core stayed a little forgiving. That softness was intentional. It meant lighter rolls for older loaders and easier feeding for small livestock herds. Daily upkeep was minimal. Grease the main pivots, check belt tracking, and inspect chain tension. Most owners bragged they could finish service before the dew lifted. Used Heston 530 balers in working order now sell between $2,500 and $4,000, depending on belt life and knotter wear. For anyone running 10 to 30 hay acres a year, that price still buys a baler that shows up, rolls bales, and heads back to the shed without drama. Number 4, Vermeer 504F. There was a time when haymaking meant long weekends, borrowed tractors, and doing the job yourself. That's where the Vermeer 504F Classic fits right in. It didn't promise more than it could deliver, and that's exactly why people trusted it. No high-capacity claims, no commercial flash, just a machine that rolled in, grabbed hay off the ground, packed it tight, and dropped clean bales without making a big deal about it. Seen from the field edge, its pickup was wide and steady. You didn't need to guess. Steel where it counted, open access where you cleared a jam, and a feel that said it was made for repeat use, not showroom appearance. It made bales roughly 4 feet wide and between 3 to 5 feet in diameter. Those bales could weigh up to 1,000 pounds, heavy enough to test loaders, yet manageable for mid-range equipment. Stackable, storable, reliable. Power came through a 540 RPM PTO shaft. Operators needed about 50 horsepower at the PTO to run it properly. A match for most utility tractors without any special upgrades. The pickup used 5 bars with around 40 tines. A wind guard roller smoothed the crop flow before it met the chamber, cutting down on uneven feeding and plugging. Inside, 6 belts shaped the hay into a round bale with defined shoulders. Belt width sat near 6 7/10 inches, with a pickup span just under 5 feet. It was the right balance of size and simplicity. Dry weight came in at 1,100 pounds. Even with options installed, you were still near 5,260 pounds, keeping it grounded in hilly terrain. Length was 12 feet and 10 inches. Width measured 7 feet and 11 inches. Height stood 8 feet and 7 inches. No issue clearing older barns or passing through standard gates. The driveline used a radial pin clutch at 540 revolutions per minute. No software, no sensors, just parts that did their job. Bales were tied off with a mechanical twine system. The machine held 4 rolls of twine and kept tying consistent and clean. Hydraulic bale tension allowed for manual density adjustment in the field. Pickup lift came standard as mechanical, with hydraulic lift offered later. Each part designed with serviceability in mind. A 3-year warranty backed the pickup's internal components. For many small operations, that meant peace of mind and less downtime across the season. No chrome, no screens, just belts, steel, and the sound of a finished bale thudding to the ground behind you. Today, used Heston 504F balers in working order now sell for between $2,500 and $4,000, depending on belt condition, twine system function, and overall maintenance history. They're not rare, but demand remains steady because they still do what they were built for: make clean, usable bales without overcomplicating the job. Number 3, International Harvester 46. You didn't buy the International Harvester 46 because someone talked you into it. You bought it because your neighbor had one, and it never seemed to stop working, no downtime. Just steady output from sunup to sundown. It wasn't futuristic or flashy, and it sure didn't beg for attention. But once it was on your farm, it earned its place the hard way by showing up every day, no matter what the skies looked like. Power came from a 6-cylinder diesel engine, rated at 108 horsepower at the crank. That put it just above the entry-level range. Ideal for farmers who needed something stronger without moving into oversized or high-maintenance territory. Drawbar output came in at about 90 horsepower, enough for pulling chisel plows or operating tandem discs. The PTO delivered close to 100 horsepower, making it well-suited for hay balers, feed grinders, and other high-draw equipment without pushing the engine to its limit. Engine displacement measured 481 cubic inches, which gave it solid torque from low revs. That meant it didn't struggle when pulling through soft ground or deep rows. It didn't surge, it just pulled smoothly and steadily. Operating weight stood at 12,300 pounds, with standard front wheels. That gave it the ballast to stay planted on soft fields. With optional dual rears or added weights, it became even more stable for heavy tillage or loader work. Top road speed was around 19 miles per hour, but in the field, it moved at a steady pace of 4 to 5 miles per hour, depending on load and terrain. It wasn't fast, but it was consistent. Fuel capacity was 65 gallons, enough to get through long days without needing a refill. Most operators could finish full work shifts on a single tank. Transmission was a synchro shuttle design with 8 forward and 2 reverse gears. It let operators change direction quickly with a smooth sweep of the lever, especially useful during loader cycles or row turns. Hydraulic flow hit around 18 gallons per minute, and the rear linkage offered over 5,000 pounds of lift. That let the 46 handle-wide implements, like planters or disc harrows, with ease. The PTO offered both 500 and 1,000 RPM speeds, selectable from inside the cab. That flexibility gave it a wide job range without hardware swaps. The operator station was simple: vinyl seat, steel deck, mechanical gauges. Visibility was open, and controls were easy to reach. It didn't rely on electronics, just mechanical reliability. Today, a well-kept International Harvester 46 can sell for between $12,000 and $18,000, depending on condition, hours, and configuration. Not because it's rare, but because it still runs, still works, and still gets the job done. Number 2, Freeman 200. Most balers announce themselves with size or speed. The Freeman 200 did not. It rolled into fields in the early 1980s and simply started working, earning trust through quiet dependability. No glossy paint and no electronics, just steel, straightforward mechanics, and a habit of turning windrows into tidy bales. Power demand stayed modest at about 30 horsepower at the PTO, a figure that paired well with the similar utility tractors. Owners could keep their existing rigs and still run a modern baler. The chamber produced small square bales that measured 14 inches by 18 inches by 24 inches. That compact size made loading wagons simpler and stacking lofts easier. Uniform shape meant fewer surprises when you grabbed a bale from the middle of a stack. A 12-inch plunger stroke packed hay firmly with every cycle. When density reached the set point, the automatic knotter tied the bale. One operator could handle the entire job without helpers riding the baler. The empty weight was close to 2,100 pounds. Lightweight kept tongue load easy on smaller tractors and made road travel smoother. In the field, it followed true, even on tight headlands. Pickup width was 56 inches. A trailing guard gathered hay toward the center, feeding it smoothly into the chamber. Consistent feeding meant dense bales with minimal leaf loss. A flywheel of about 50 pounds stored just enough energy to smooth plunger movements. When windrows thinned, the baler kept its rhythm instead of jerking and risking a plug. The twine box held roughly 300 feet of standard bale twine, enough for dozens of bales between reloads. The cover opened wide, so checking twine levels was quick and safe. Density adjustments used spring tension levers on the bale case. Set them once and they held through changing crop conditions, giving even bale weight across the field. Safety features were basic but effective. Shields covered the PTO shaft and the knotter area, keeping hands clear of moving parts during service. Daily service involved greasing 4 fittings on the pickup and 2 on the knotters, plus checking chain tension. Most owners finished upkeep in minutes before the dew burned off. Freeman kept parts support into the 1990s, and aftermarket suppliers still carry belts, chains, and twine knives. Longevity matters when equipment is expected to outlive its financing. A well-kept Freeman 200 now sells for between $3,000 and $5,000. Not because collectors prize it, but because it still does exactly what it promised when new. Bale hay, reliably without drama. Number 1. New Idea 456. Before spec sheets ruled buying decisions, machines earned their place by showing up and getting through the work without slowing you down. The New Idea 456 did exactly that. It wasn't designed to stand out in a lineup. It was designed to deliver when the hay was ready and time was short. Released in the late 1970s, it carved out a niche with operators who valued simplicity that held up season after season. Through the 80s, it kept doing what it was meant to do: bale clean, run steady, and never get in the way of the next field. What kind of bales did it make? The classic kind. Each one measured 14 inches by 18 inches, sized just right to stack neatly in a hayloft or load tight in a truck bed. Light enough to move by hand, solid enough to hold together all season. If you've stacked hay before, you know shape matters. Pickup width came in at about 50 inches, wide enough to sweep most windrows in one pass. No extra loops, no second chances. The cleaner the pickup, the tighter the bale. And this machine delivered, especially if your rows were raked right. Power came from a standard 500 RPM PTO, with the baler needing around 35 horsepower to run. That meant you didn't need a brand new tractor. Your Chalmers 185 or Ford 4000 could handle it just fine. No upgrades, no headaches. The plunger stroke, smooth. Every cycle compressed hay with a clean, steady motion. Once full, the twin knotter system kicked in. No sensors, no software. Just mechanical precision that worked as long as you greased the zerks and kept your twine dry. It weighed around 2,800 pounds, so it tracked well behind small and mid-sized tractors without bouncing through rough patches. Transport clearance stayed under 12 feet, meaning it slipped through most barn doors and rural gates without needing a spotter. Want firmer bales? Manual screw tensioners let you crank up the pressure. Want fewer interruptions? The twine box held about 300 feet, good for dozens of bales between reloads. Service was as easy as it gets. 7 chains drove the internals, all checkable from the ground. Greasing? 6 main fittings. A morning walk around and you were ready to roll. Optional upgrades included a hydraulic bale thrower and a basic light kit for working after sunset. Not fancy, but useful. Farmers appreciated the visibility when they were chasing daylight. So, what's a clean new idea 456 worth today? Expect to pay between $2,500 and $4,000, depending on condition and extras. That's not bad for a machine that still shows up and works like it never left the 70s. They weren't made to look pretty in showrooms. They were made to work, and they've proved it every season since. Which baler caught your eye? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more.